It was a quiet afternoon in the Canary Islands. The sun hung lazily over the horizon, brushing the clouds with a soft orange hue. Tenerife, a tranquil island in the Atlantic Ocean, was known for its serene beaches, its towering volcano, and its peaceful rhythm. But on March 27, 1977, this paradise would become the site of the deadliest aviation disaster in history, a tragedy that unfolded not in the skies, but on the ground. Two massive Boeing 747 jumbo jets, the pride of aviation technology, would meet on a fog-shrouded runway in a sequence of miscommunications, coincidences, and human errors so tragic that it would change aviation forever. That morning, the skies over Europe were tense. Terrorism was on the rise, and a bomb had just exploded in the terminal of Gran Canaria Airport, another island in the Canary chain. It forced the airport to close temporarily for security sweeps. Dozens of flights bound for Gran Canaria were diverted to nearby Tenerife's Los Rodeos Airport, a much smaller regional airfield not designed to handle such traffic. Among those diverted flights were two giants, KLM Flight 4805 from Amsterdam and Pan Am Flight 1736 from Los Angeles via New York. KLM's flight was commanded by Captain Jacob Veldhuizen Van Zanten, a name that carried enormous weight in aviation circles. Van Zanten wasn't just a pilot, he was KLM's chief flight instructor, the face of the airline's safety training program. Even appearing in its advertisements, the man was a legend, and his presence inspired confidence. But that day, his authority and reputation would inadvertently play a role in the chain of events leading to disaster. The Pan Am flight, meanwhile, was under the command of Captain Victor Grubbs and First Officer Robert Bragg. Experienced, calm, and professional, they had ferried hundreds of passengers safely across the Atlantic countless times. Their Boeing 747, named Clipper Victor, was the first 747 ever delivered to Pan Am, a symbol of the golden age of aviation. When both aircraft landed at Tenerife's Los Rodeos Airport, the small facility quickly became overcrowded. The tarmac overflowed with aircraft waiting for Gran Canaria to reopen. Taxiways that were meant for small planes now brimmed with massive 747s, forcing ground crews to improvise. The narrow taxiways couldn't accommodate the wingspans of the jumbo jets, leaving them parked on the main runway itself. That single runway would soon become both a taxi route and the only way in or out. Inside the terminal, passengers milled about restlessly. The Pan Am crew and passengers were frustrated. Tenerife wasn't their destination. They were tired, hungry, and eager to get going. The KLM crew decided to refuel their aircraft while waiting, topping off the tanks for the return flight to Amsterdam, a decision that would later prove fatal, as it added extra minutes to their delay and extra weight to their aircraft. Hours ticked by. The Gran Canaria Airport finally reopened, and the stranded flights began preparing to depart. The KLM plane, having finished refueling, was cleared to taxi first, but to reach the end of the runway for takeoff, it had to taxi all the way down the same runway it would later use to take off. Behind it, the Pan Am 747 would follow, instructed to exit the runway at the third taxiway and wait there so the KLM could take off ahead of them. The weather began to shift. A thick fog started rolling in from the ocean, quickly blanketing the airport. Visibility dropped from clear skies to less than 300 meters in minutes. The control tower, small and poorly equipped, lost visual contact with both planes. What happened next would unfold almost entirely through radio transmissions, words that would later be dissected, analyzed, and immortalized as examples of how communication can go fatally wrong. As KLM reached the end of the runway, it turned around, positioning itself for takeoff. Captain Van Zanten and his first officer, Klaus Mears, went through their pre-takeoff checklist. The co-pilot radioed the tower to confirm their clearance, but the tower's response was ambiguous, partly due to overlapping radio transmissions. The controller told KLM to stand by for takeoff and then gave Pan Am instructions to report when clear of the runway. At that exact moment, Pan Am was still taxiing down the runway in the dense fog, searching for the third taxiway exit. The markings were hard to see, and the crew missed it. They continued slowly, trying to locate the next exit, but because of the fog, Neither the tower nor the KLM crew could see that the Pan Am jet was still on the runway A, directly in the path of KLM's massive plane. Inside the KLM cockpit, Captain Van Zanten believed he had been cleared for takeoff. "We're going," he said firmly, pushing the throttles forward. The four engines roared to life, vibrating the ground. The co-pilot hesitated, uncertain whether they were actually cleared. "Wait, we don't have clearance yet," he said. But Van Zanten, confident in his interpretation, replied, yes, we have clearance." Meanwhile, in the fog ahead, the Pan Am crew heard something, the sound of engines. They couldn't see anything, but they knew another aircraft was on the runway. First Officer Bragg said, "He's taking off." Captain Grubbs reacted instantly, shouting, "Get off, get off." He slammed the throttles forward and tried to turn the massive jet off the runway. At 160 knots, KLM 747 sped through the fog, its pilots unaware of the danger ahead. Then, out of the white mist, the dark silhouette of the Pan Am jet appeared impossibly close. Van Zanten yanked the control column back, trying to lift off early. The nose rose, the tail struck the ground, and the aircraft briefly became airborne. But it was too late. The KLM jet's undercarriage and engines sliced through the top of the Pan Am fuselage. The impact ripped both planes apart. A fireball erupted, consuming the fog in orange light. The sound was deafening, a thunderous explosion that shattered windows across the airport. The KLM plane stayed airborne for a moment longer, then crashed back onto the runway and exploded. All 248 people aboard were killed instantly. On the Pan Am jet, chaos erupted. The forward section was torn open, flames spreading rapidly through the cabin. Passengers screamed and scrambled to escape. Captain Grubbs and his crew fought desperately to evacuate survivors through the broken fuselage. Of the 396 people on board, only 61 managed to escape the inferno. The airport descended into chaos. Emergency crews couldn't see through the fog, unsure where the wreckage was. The fires burned for hours. When rescue teams finally reached the site, they were met with a scene of utter devastation: a twisted metal, scattered luggage, and the smell of burning jet fuel. In the aftermath, investigators from Spain, the Netherlands, and the United States arrived to piece together what had happened. What they found was not a single catastrophic mistake, but a tragic chain of small errors, coincidences, and miscommunications at a perfect storm. The investigation revealed that the KLM captain had misunderstood the tower's instruction, believing he was cleared for takeoff when he was actually told to wait. Contributing to the confusion were overlapping radio transmissions as the KLM co-pilot's call and the Pan Am crew's reply had been transmitted simultaneously, causing a heterodyne effect that garbled the words in both cockpits. Crucially, KLM never heard the tower's words, "Stand by for takeoff." Psychologists would later study Captain Van Zanten's decision-making. They theorized that his authority and experience may have created a subtle pressure within the cockpit. His co-pilot and flight engineer both questioned the takeoff clearance, but Van Zanten's confidence and the rigid hierarchy of airline culture at the time prevented them from pushing back. The phenomenon would later be called authority gradient, a dangerous imbalance in cockpit communication. The Pan Am crew's missed taxiway exit also played a role. The fog, poor signage, and lack of ground radar made it nearly impossible for them to see where they were. Had they managed to exit the runway, the disaster might have been averted by mere seconds. Ultimately, the official report concluded that the primary cause was the KLM captain's premature takeoff and the miscommunication between the flight crew and air traffic control. But the real story went deeper. It was about human factors, about how stress, fatigue, authority, and assumption can combine to tragic effect. The loss was staggering. 583 people perished at the deadliest accident in aviation history. For the survivors, the memories never faded. Some described running through fire, others spoke of the silence afterward, broken only by the crackling of flames. Many would never fly again. But out of the ashes of Tenerife came profound change. The aviation industry realized that something fundamental had to evolve. Communication protocols were overhauled. Ambiguous phrases like "OK" or "takeoff" were replaced with standardized, unambiguous terminology. Air traffic controllers and pilots began using precise language such as cleared for takeoff or hold position. The word takeoff itself became reserved only for the final clearance to avoid any confusion. Perhaps the most lasting legacy of the Tenerife disaster was the creation of a new philosophy in aviation, crew resource management, or CRM. It taught pilots to challenge decisions regardless of rank, to speak up, to communicate assertively, and to work as a team rather than a hierarchy. It was a direct response to what happened in the KLM cockpit that day. Today, CRM is standard practice in every airline across the world, saving countless lives. At Los Rodeos, now known as Tenerife North Airport, the scars remain. A small memorial stands near the runway, a quiet reminder of the day when two of the world's largest airplanes met on the same stretch of tarmac and fate intertwined their paths. In the decades since, aviation has become exponentially safer. The lessons learned from Tenerife echo in every cockpit, every control tower, every training manual. Pilots are taught to double-check, to verify, to question, and to never assume. Every time you hear a pilot confirm with the tower, every time you hear a precise clearance, a part of that discipline was born from that foggy afternoon in 1977. And yet, despite all the technology, all the progress, Tenerife remains a haunting reminder of the human side of flight, that even in the most advanced machines, the most skilled professionals are still fallible. That safety is not just about technology, but about understanding, communication, and humility. The legacy of those 583 souls lives on in every safe landing, in every careful exchange between pilot and controller, in every moment where someone speaks up to prevent a mistake. It is their silent contribution to the skies we trust today. March 27, 1977, the day two jumbo jets collided, the day that changed aviation forever.